Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on a narrow frame Ambassador. This is the Ambassadeur Royal Express. Now, this format is one of my favorites. This happens to be a reel I fished. I just started getting it ready for the spring and have reduced or taken off the line. But this is the 4600 C3. And for the most part, these reels are going to be pretty much the same inside. But I thought I would show you how to take this apart, how to service it, and how to get it fishing again, which is kind of what the whole idea of Second Chance Tackle is. So Mike sent me in a bunch of reels. He sent me in a damn quick reel, a big one, 550. He sent me in another Ambassador, and he also included a Daiwa Procaster in there, and all of them have been kind of suffering the same thing, dried grease, and been a while since it's been serviced. This one seems to do okay. I didn't notice anything obvious when I did a test, and I always like to test the reels before I start servicing them, just in case there's anything obvious there. This one turns. It turns a little slow, but other than that, it seems to be doing okay. So we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces. You saw me take the nut cap off, and then the nut, and then there's a little C-clip that holds the gear sleeve onto the post, so you want to get all of those pieces off. Then you can remove the handle. Underneath the handle, you're going to have a little tension clip, and then under that tension clip, you'll have the 4-star adjuster. That comes off in a counterclockwise manner. So I've been working on a lot of reels today. I thought this is a good opportunity to remind you that if you'd like to see all of the videos that I do, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit the notification button, and those will take you to the time that I post, so that you'll see them as they get released. And then you can make a choice as to whether you want to view them or not. As I mentioned, I was on a low-profile bait caster. I did a piece of work on the vintage Damn Quick, and now we're kind of working on an Ambassador. So I get to work on a lot of different reels, and I would encourage you to use the notification button to let you know when I post, and then you can see if those are reels that you would be interested in. Well, I really like the small format. I fished the Bayshore in the Hudson River estuary down near New York City a lot, and this is perfect. This will allow you to cast far, get out to where the fish are, and get yourself situated for them. So there's 2 bearings in this spool. Another reason why I like this reel. If you remove that little clip ring there, you'll be able to access the second bearing. And on this side, you have a bearing in here as well. So there's a little clip here that holds this on. And if you wanted to remove the bearing, you remove this clip, and then you remove the bearing inside. This didn't appear to have any indication of a problem with those bearings. Inside here, all you have is a bushing, and also have a Teflon idler gear, which transfers the spool to the level line function gear, the worm gear. And you can put a little bit of oil on there. I don't put anything else. Also, while you're oiling, you can oil the posts of the trip lever here. But that's it. You don't need to do anything more inside the case unless something is working poorly. While I have this off and have a lot of things out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and service the worm gear and the pawl before I get started on the gear side. So if you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on a reel and you got stuck, maybe you wondered why I was just kind of banging away there to knock that pawl out, well, just leave it in the comment section. I'll try to respond to that. Well, I took this pawl out because, as I mentioned, the reels that Mike set in have had a lot of dried grease, and you can see dried grease right on the fork here. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that that grease gets off the prongs, and it also gets off the shoulder where that prong meets the cylinder. If you let that accumulate, it's going to start skipping in the slots of the worm gear. And if it starts slipping in the slots of the worm gear, it's going to hang up as it tries to turn. Alright, so we took care of the 2 of those. I'm going to put that little cylinder right back into the carrier. And then what you want to do is, you're going to notice it sits proud. This belongs down here. So push it down with your finger, hold it, and turn that worm gear until it seats in. And you'll notice you just heard the snap. It's seated properly now. Now I'm going to back it off to the side so that I can get that cap on again. That's a good reason to tell you use a parts tray. I've been putting my pieces and parts in there. I just left that cap off to the side, and all of a sudden it just kind of ran off my table there, or the board that I use to protect my table. I get questions all the time, when am I going to upgrade that board? That board's been with me for 20 plus years. And I don't think it's going to make another 20, but I guess at some point in time I probably should change that over, but not right now. There's a little bit of dried grease I'm noticing on the shield that protects the worm gear, so I'm just going to go ahead while I'm at it and do that as well. And then one final piece of lubrication before we move on is get some oil onto the worm gear. I oil the worm gear. I do not grease the worm gear, because those tracks tend to get congested with grease. They tend to jam and dry, and then it's not working as efficiently as it should. We're going to take the two screws out now that are holding the rest of the side plate to the bridge plate, and then that will expose the gears and the internal workings of this reel. And again, this is a service. You don't need to kind of take the whole reel apart if you don't want to, but most of the time you want to do what we're doing here. You want to clean it. That includes the exterior pieces. So I'll use a little bit of rod and reel cleaner. I'm going to use Penn's rod and reel cleaner here and a little kitchen scrubby. And that'll just take off all the old kind of film on this metal, putting it up for the as a part of the service. We'll set that off to the side. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures. So there's one obvious thing here. It's this big spring sitting here. Get rid of that in a hurry. Take that spring and put it into a parts tray. I use a bottom of a fast food container for the parts tray. You don't want to lose that spring because it will become problematic. All right, so the next part of the service says remove the main gear. That main gear has got a little forked dog attached to it, so we're going to pull that whole assembly right off and place that on my table. And then we have our carrier, or what's called the yoke, that comes off next. And then this is the assembly that is the kick, and you wanted to take all those pieces off because you see we have dried grease. I'm going to use a penetrating oil to get rid of all of that dried grease, because the dried grease will slow the performance of the reel. And again, I kind of had a heads up to myself in my thinking, because everything else that's come in from Mike has kind of had this situation where it's been dried grease. The penetrating oil is going to it's going to liquefy all the dried grease. That's going to enable you to clean it up. If you need to take the pieces off, let's say if this was corroded or if something was broken or anything like that, there's one C-clip holding this assembly on. It's right here, and you want to remove that if you won't need to remove the arms. Notice that I said it's a good thing to take pictures if you're not familiar with the reel. There is a tension spring that fits in a little slot on the side of this bridge. It might be hard to see. This tension spring is here. It wraps around and it goes into a hole on this side of that release. And that's important to notice, because if you take this whole thing apart, well, that's where it goes on the back end if you weren't paying attention. So take pictures along the way just to remind yourself in case you get in some trouble on the reassembly. So we'll show you how that pre-spool release works then. There's a little hole here, right there. From the back of the case, the trip lever, this little pin right here, is going to go in there, and that's going to push that piece down like that, and you can see how it moves down. And that's going to push the yoke up. This is the yoke. It's going to push that up and pull the gear off of the spool. And then when you trip it, you're going to push that whole assembly back up. So it's going to go back up like this. So that spring is important in terms of how it acts. And make sure that you clean it up. lube it up. We're going to put some fishing reel oil in here, and I only use fishing reel oils and greases, and that's all I recommend. I get questions all the time, can gun oil work, can 3-in-1 oil work, and things like that. Fishing reel greases and oils are not that expensive. They're designed for fishing reels. And I asked the guys that asked me on the gun oil, I said, would you use fishing reel oil on a gun? And they say, heck no. And then I said, well, why would you use gun oil on a fishing reel? Well, I haven't got a satisfactory answer there yet, other than it's convenient. All right, there's a little bit of grease that we're going to do on here. This pulls out. It's just a snap in if you like, but since there's nothing wrong or greasy or anything inside there, we're just going to get it well greased. Notice if you did take that out, that the spring side that we were loading, remember, has a hole in the back of it here where that spring goes. So that's going to be the face. There's a slotted portion of that pinion gear. You can see the slot here. That's going to accept the prongs on the spool. We were talking about that before. There's 2 prongs in the spool here. Those are going to mesh in like that, and make sure when you go to reinstall that that's facing inward on the assembly. So that goes in this way, just like that. So that's the start of this assembly. All right, we have a anti-reverse dog. We have a little copper washer. Don't lose those copper washers. That copper washer belongs on the bridge post on the bottom, right there. Now, I can take this anti-reverse off. This is a traditional fork tongue anti-reverse dog. Take the stack off because I want to examine inside to make sure that the drag washer assembly is okay. You can do that by pulling off the main gear like this. Notice there's a little bit of dried grease in there, no surprise to that. Now this assembly can go back on. Somebody greased the front plate of that. There's no need to grease that front plate, but last time around I guess it got greased. And we have 2 drag washers in here. We have a drag washer on each side. We have a thick one and a thin one. I'll call this the thick one. I wanted to take that off because underneath here we have some more dried grease. So I'm going to use a piece of steel wool, 4/0 steel wool. Don't use anything more coarse than 4/0, which is very fine, to buff that and make sure that that's clean. And then on the back here we have the thin one. And you want to just test for flexibility, make sure that they're not dried out. I'm thinking these are some kind of a fabric, so we're going to go ahead and just do a light greasing of those, just to keep them fresh. And we'll do that with Cal's Universal Grease. There's no label on it. All the chemicals that I've been using over time, I guess, have worn that label off the back. You'll know that the thin one belongs there. You'll see that the indentation in the case is appropriate for that. I just put a little bit on. I use my gloved hand as a tool, and you should wipe the excess off if there's too much on there. And the whole idea with that is just keeping it flexible. Check the teeth on the main gear. These aren't clogged, they're all uniform. If they were, go ahead and grab either a hard wire brush or a bristle brush like a toothbrush. Just knock any excess residue out of there. Okay, you can see now why that little rim washer goes, because there's only a little rim on that carrier on that bridge shaft. I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Now I'm going to use my brush. I think I got ahead of myself. So let's go ahead and take that anti-reverse dog, because it's going to be hard to mesh it. Just got to get the orientation right. One fork belongs above, one fork belongs below. While I got it out, I was going to grease it while it was on the shaft, but since it's out again, I'll take some fishing reel grease. This is Penn's Precision Reel Grease. I'm going to go ahead and put that back on. And now when I put that shaft down, I'm going to aim that anti-reverse dog for that post on the side there. We'll make sure everything is meshed in. Now if you want to turn it at this point, fine. Keep your finger here because that dog will kick out, and then you're going to have to go ahead and reset the whole thing again. Alright, that appears to be everything that needs to be done there. Right, just clean off the excess grease on that cap washer, and we'll be ready to reinstall, give it a test, see how we did. So if you're like Mike, and you have a reel that you would like to have serviced, you don't want to do it yourself, then if you contact me by email on the business card that follows, I'll be happy to provide you the repair information. The whole notion of this channel has been teach you to do it yourself, but I understand there's folks that either don't have the time or just don't want to get involved in doing it. That's okay. Just contact me. I do provide that as a service. Alright, we've put the case back on. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. Now I said that this was similar to the 4600C. It's not. That internal, oops, that reminds me, just as we're doing this, I was going to tell you that internal design is different because of the spring setup on the yoke, and sure enough I forgot the spring. Now there you go. Alright, that spring goes back in. Now we can put that case on. They use a slightly different yoke assembly on the 4600C, and that's why I do a lot of ambassadors on my channel. There's several different iterations of this over time, and a lot of folks will say, well, yeah, I followed yours, but it's not exactly the setup that I have. So the more that I put out, the more I can reference when they're asking, do you have a video out there that shows how to service a particular model of the Ambassador? Okay, now we got it. Tighten down that second one. Now we can put the star adjuster on. This is another reason why that parts tray helps so much, because all you have to do is look in your parts tray. I mean, I remembered myself that spring on the yoke there, but if I didn't remember, if I looked into my parts tray later on, well, I would see a spring in there and know that, well, I forgot something along the way. Alright, if you get a spinner like this, every now and then you do, I just grab that post with a little needle nose plier until I clear the post. Sometimes it just gets stuck. If you're having trouble with that, use a wire brush to clean the threads on that gear post. You'll be fine. Alright, that goes on. Next is that little tension spring. That's so you don't, if you're backing off your drag washer there or your star adjuster there, you don't jam it into the handle. Use that cloth that still has that rod and reel cleaner on it to take that film off of the handle. I'm going to use the oil just to oil the studs so that those handle knobs turn free and easy without barking too much. And with the handle on, you can put that C-clip or E-clip, I guess it's an E-clip, back on. Most of the time you can do this one by hand strength alone. If you need an assist, use a little pliers and pull it in that way. Now we can put the handle nut back on. This is a 10mm nut. I like to put it on as much as I can by threading it by hand to start. That way I know I'm not cross-stripping the bridge post. And then that last turn, you can use a wrench. If you line that point up on the nut with the hole for the carrier, you can generally get it right in terms of having the hole aligned for your screw. And then we'll put that screw in. We'll remind you how to reset the side plate. I talked about it a little bit before when we were explaining how that yoke works. And that's where a lot of people sometimes make a mistake with the reassembly of the reel right there. I want to put a little bit of that grease onto each stud of the spool. I'll reseat the spool into the cavity below. Now, when you're servicing your own reel at this time of the year, it's good idea to remove and replace that line as well. All right, remember what we said. That's got to go through that little pinch hole. That little pinch hole is located right here. That's where we ran our piece before. So, and the only way you're going to get it in there is to pull up on the button. If you try to do that, you won't be able to merge it. It has to come up when you go to set the reel. Then look for that hole there. Make sure your brakes are in on the spool. Then it should all kind of come together. And come together it did. All right. I'm going to tighten down the screws. These have that little cross hatching going on. One more. All right, and then I think this is over tightened here. Boy, is that over tightened. Golly, I don't know why we tightened down, who tightened that down so much, but this is your spool adjuster and it's way over tight. You know, if you put too much tension on that spool, it's not going to crank easily, and it's going to actually impede the performance of the reel. You won't be able to cast very well either. All right, let's see how we did. Still can come off. There you go. Much better. All right, and then we want to make sure that our free spool works. You push down. You heard a nice click. There you go. We have a free spool. And then you want to make sure that it returns. And clicking out made it return easily. Very nice. And then, of course, we had the drag apart, so let's make sure we tighten down the drag and that it is working well. Yep, drag's holding. So everything is doing just what it should be doing. And for that, that'll conclude the service of this reel. So to all that are first responders, essential personnel, uniformed folks and all, thank you for everything you've done during the pandemic. It's good to see that it's in regression at the moment. Hopefully it stays that way. And we'll all be able to get out in the spring, do the fishing that we'd love to do, and rebuild some of the relationships that we haven't been able to do in a while. So to everybody who's had a role in that, thank you. To everybody else, including myself, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.